Hallo, willkommen zurück. Hi, welcome back. My name is Tanya, and here are the facts. I am German. I live in Germany. I'm a beginner writer. I'm writing my first novel, which is a YA fantasy, and I'm writing it in English instead of German. In fact, I don't have any intentions, even in the future so far, to write books in German. And so this is what this video is about, is the question why? But why? Before we get into it, I just wanted to make clear that I'm not the first. I'm not the only person who is writing a book in a language that is not their own. I'm sure that the history books are full of big literary people, and I could have totally done my research. But instead, let me just tell you who I am aware of here on YouTube. Leah Writes and Curious Cat, who are both French.
And also Jody Breyer,
who is Italian. In a Discord, someone from Austria who writes exclusively in English, like me. In another Discord, I know there's also someone from Slovakia. Just so we're clear that I'm not trying to be like, oh my god, look at me, so special. Editing Tanya here. Well, the video was already edited, rendered, and uploaded, but I have to add 2 people to the list who I, in the meantime, found out about. One is Regula Binder, who is Swiss German. So now we have the trifecta of German speakers represented. I think the Austrian one is probably going to publish videos at some point too. Anyway, also very interesting, and that ties back to what I'm talking about at the very end of the video. I don't know how to pronounce it, but Ann Glimma, who is Swedish and is actually going the traditionally published route through an US agent into the US publishing market. So yeah, very fascinating. Definitely check out all of the channels that I mentioned. Again, the links are below. Oh, and if I come across anyone else in the meantime or later on, I'll try to add everyone's channel down below. If you have any more suggestions, also leave them down in the comments. Okay, that's all. If you're in this club too, let me know in the comments. And if you're not in the club, maybe you're asking yourself why, and that's why I'm here. In my own mind, this question kind of spiderwebs out. So all of my thoughts I've kind of tried to group into a few sub-questions. One is, why English specifically and not German? How come I feel confident enough to write a whole novel in English? Why it's more fun for me rather than being harder? Does this make me a poorer writer? Does it give me some strength? And there's also, at the end, a publishing question, which I don't have any answers to. Yeah, let's get started.
warum machst du es dir unnötig schwerer? So why do I write in English specifically? I have no familial or cultural connections to the English language or have been abroad in an English-speaking country. By all accounts, my second strongest language should be Spanish, but that's another story. English just happens to be very prevalent. It's the first foreign language we learn in school, and English-speaking media is extremely widespread and dominant in the world, which is its own issue, but also makes it very, very easy to immerse yourself in the language. So I guess the other side to this question is why not write in German or write in both languages, really? So it's kind of a question of the path of least resistance. I'm in too deep. I surround myself with so much English all the time that I feel much more self-conscious now in German. In part, that will probably always be the case because it's my native language, and so I hate when something sounds weird and stilted. Even as a reader, I cringe much more at writing in German than I do in English. Though at the same time, I'm sometimes not even sure anymore if something sounds right in German or not. And that makes me feel very self-conscious. Like I should know. Sometimes I will say something in German that is really a poor man's translation of an expression in English, and I can feel that it's not quite right, but also the right expression doesn't come to my mind. Sometimes saying or writing something in English is easier than switching gears. If I've been reading and listening to English the whole day, I also feel like I'm not good at switching gears between languages in general. I'm kind of in awe, actually, of those who write in both languages. The other part is also that I don't feel bad about leaving the German language behind in that way. I don't know. I mean, it's also not a minority language.
I also remembered recently that in the very beginning, when I was kind of deciding if I wanted to write in German or in English, it was sort of also a business question for me. Only sort of. So I was definitely wondering which market is bigger in terms of the readership, the German-speaking world or the English-speaking world, or the book market, I guess. I was wondering, how big the competition is in terms of, authors and books put out. But honestly, I did zero research into this. Those were just questions that I had. I also thought that, far in the future, when I have the readership of a certain size and I have the funds, I get translations of my books, that it would be easier to translate from English to German. I think this one is true. I mean, will I ever get translations? Who knows? But yeah, I feel like that it's easier to find a translator who is a native German speaker working with English than finding a native English-speaking translator who works with German. You know what I mean? So there's that. In the end, it all just came down to me wanting to write in English and me wanting to also show up online in English.
It's also the case that I read mostly in English. If I wanted to write in German, I would have to read a lot more in German too. But almost all the books I read are in English. This is the market and the book world that I know. Pretty much all the books that I love live here. When I started to get back into writing, I say back, though I haven't really been consistently writing before. Anyway, back then I hadn't read in years either. My writing journey started with coming across writing advice videos on YouTube. And since I was watching stuff mostly in English already, those videos were from English-speaking writers too. And I knew and I heard from everyone how important reading is for your craft. And I couldn't agree more now. But it was quite daunting back then because I didn't even know what genre I wanted to read, what genre I wanted to write. I had no clue. I also had no real understanding of what genres are, how they work. I was very lost. I tried a few things, and I also looked to author tubers and booktubers for book suggestions, and all of that was in English, and so here we are. I read mostly in English. Du musst wohl große Stücke auf dich halten. So I feel like a big question, kind of the elephant in the room, is do I not feel self-conscious in English while speaking or writing? At least that's what I'm imagining that you're wondering. I don't know. And here's the thing, I don't usually think about the fact that it's slightly weird that I'm writing a book in English, that in my videos I have an accent and might be making small mistakes all the time. If so, maybe don't tell me, because this is, believe it or not, an insecurity that hasn't entered my mind yet. Please and thank you. I don't even really think about it when I would share snippets of how I dictate. So, you know, in those snippets you can literally hear my raw first draft words and hear all the things that are off, that I'm not aware of. And yeah, I had to think about this, and I think that is because so far no one here has asked me to explain myself or even expressed any curiosity about it until I brought it up myself, you know. So this whole time I haven't felt weird about being an outsider in a space with native speakers writing in English. The times I felt self-conscious about this was mostly when writing came up in conversation with someone here in Germany. Not always, but often I would kind of admit to this being a book in English. And I always fear that people think, like, who does she think she is? That's so weird and pretentious. The worst time was when I was in a local writing class, which I haven't attended many, but that was actually really good. And in that class, we were talking about our projects. And what made it worse was this moment when we shared snippets of our writing out loud, which was the first time for me in general to do something like that. But I had been speaking German the whole time during these classes, and like it was like a whole day kind of affair. And as I said, I find it hard to switch gears. And so the words, my own words that I had written in English, didn't come out right as I read them out loud at first. I had to warm up to speaking English again. I sounded like I didn't even speak English fluently while reading out my snippet of writing. It was so weird. Yeah, I felt quite self-conscious. Maybe another question would be why I get to be so confident in English. So this is really funny. Leia Writes had her own video on why she writes both in English and in French. Leia, in her video, talked about how she started to really get into English by way of watching a TV show. One she started watching on television in its dubbed version, and then switching to the original because it took too long. And it was the same for me. In her case, it was Gossip Girl, and in my case, it was Heart of Dixie, which is kind of so random. Also, I was quite deliberate about it. I did not just watch. No. I would watch that show with a big A4 3 columns vocabulary notebook and pen in hand. And whenever I heard a word or expression I didn't understand or that was new to me, I would stop and rewind, look at what the subtitles said exactly, and if need be, I looked up the translation. And then I would write it down in my notebook. I was not casual about it. And for no reason. This wasn't for an exam or to go abroad or something. I just wanted to and had just discovered that you can learn a lot from TV. So, I don't know, I find this very funny. The show was set in the American South, Alabama, which is funny to me too because the expressions I learned might have been quite specific to the South. I don't know. I distinctly remember learning come hell or high water, and I was like, whoa, I get what that means. I don't know why that was so exciting to me, but yeah, and I have since been reading, listening, and watching so much stuff in English all of the time that it has just begun to seep into my brain without me consciously thinking about it. And I don't know, at some point I just felt like I can pretty much do anything in English. Which again, please don't tell me if you think I'm actually not good enough. Moving on. Was ist so toll daran, auf Englisch zu schreiben? So, we've covered why I feel that I can write in English, but not really why I want to. And the big reason is that it's fun. It is a lot of fun using a foreign language, especially once you're at a level where you feel really comfortable in it. But you still have things to learn, you know? Every new turn of phrase that I pick up, and honestly, that probably happens literally every day, even if I don't notice it. Every new turn of phrase is a fun little discovery. Every time I feel like I expressed something in a very smooth and natural way, I feel a little bit of satisfaction. Itty bitty hits of dopamine, you know what I mean? And there's always also a lot of culture and history to discover in the words. Like when you suddenly realize where that word that you've heard and used a bunch of times actually comes from. The same thing can obviously happen in your own language, especially with expressions from different areas and different times. But I feel like it's on a different scale with a foreign language. There are more, I guess, more veils to lift because as you learn, at first, you just learn the words as they are, and you don't really see all of the traces of their origins, if you know what I mean. Okay, more to the point of writing in English rather than speaking it. I feel a lot more comfortable with being playful with language in English than in German. That is in part because I don't feel the cringe as acutely as a native speaker would. And you know what? If my words come out clumsy, guess what, mister? This isn't even my native language, so you can't really tell me anything, you know. Of course, that's not the case when you publish a book, but more on that later. Yeah, and so that actually might be helpful in the first draft because maybe I have less expectations for my words to come out pristine and beautiful. But also, And if there's a linguist in the audience who knows more about this, I'd love to hear from you. I would say that English is a very flexible language and that English speakers are very playful with it. I feel like that is more the case than with German. I don't know. I really feel like there are way more things you're allowed to do with English. Like, the thing that is most prominent to me and most impressive and most fun is that you can make a verb out of pretty much any word. And even things that aren't words at all. This is all not to say that English is inherently a better language to write in, better than German, better than other languages. It's just that for me specifically, it feels more freeing. English also makes it easier for me to be exuberant and extravagant and expressive in my language in a way that might not come as comfortably in German, where I wouldn't as readily say that I love and adore things. For example, I don't use as grand words as that in German. Or it might feel more foreign to me to use colorful metaphors and such in German because it's not something I grew up with. Maybe that's different when you've been writing all along and been reading books all along. I mean, I was a reader when I was young, but in school I lost that for a couple of years. I say that because I feel like my brain is becoming more writerly or writerlier. I don't know. The more I read and write in these past few years. So this getting comfortable with colorful language might also just be me becoming more comfortable with writing in general. Wie willst du denn mit den anderen mithalten? So, this is a question that I hadn't really engaged with before making this video, but does this make me a better or a poorer writer? Is my book doomed? So, the words, they flow for the most part. It's not harder for me than for a native speaker to come up with the sentences, I don't think. And whenever the German word comes to me first, and only the German word, I'll just write that as a placeholder. My transcription software even often picks up on it when I speak really clearly a German word in the middle of a sentence in English, which is kind of incredible. And when I get some weird interpretation of the word with furious red squiggly lines under it, I can usually remember which word that was supposed to be. The trouble is when neither the German nor the English word comes to me, that is when you got to worry. So, something that Leah said in her video also made me think. She mentioned having 2 color palettes to work with. And maybe she meant it more in a sense because she writes both in English and in French. And so she works with either one. But I think something like it might end up being a tool of mine too, that I can, for example, bring in a simile or expression from German that maybe isn't common in English, though there is more overlap there than you'd think. I've been surprised many a time. Maybe it's also easier as an outsider to think of a new way to say something because I haven't been hearing the same phrases all my life. They're not as ingrained, I'd assume. Or maybe I can look at the words with a different eye. Not sure. I have recently also had the thought, because I'm in a way reconnecting with the German language, which is a strange thing to say. I realized that I might want to read some German books, short ones that play with language, or even poetry, which I usually don't do in either language, because the thought was that maybe this might help me be more inventive with language if I invited in more of a German influence. I don't know. And I do have a couple of favorites, especially like funny absurdist books that I would also very much enjoy reading. That would be very interesting to play with and see what happens. Now, obviously, there are also limitations. As I've said, I'm learning new things constantly, and so on the flip side, there's obviously a lot I haven't learned yet. So there are also specific areas of vocabulary that are kind of blind spots for me. Like, I notice when I read books, which again I mostly do in English, when plants and flowers are named, or when architecture or furniture are described, I'm mostly just shrugging and scratching my head because I don't know what you're referring to, so I can't picture it. And when I made that kind of baking show style video, I also realized that the kitchen might be another blind spot, though it might also be that it's just more difficult to get the right words out when I'm multitasking or tired or something. But yeah, I feel like there are different areas where I just don't have the words. I might also be using words wrong. I barely ever look stuff up. I don't double check anymore. The words I use and how I use them, that all comes from how I hear and read English being used. So that's not an exact science. I don't always factually know what a word actually means, like the definition or the translation of it, and I might be off target sometimes. I notice that there are like little grammatical things that I tend to do wrong, and there are probably a lot more little grammatical things that I do wrong that I'm not even aware of. I can't really look at my manuscript and objectively tell like how much of the language is messed up. Yeah, so obviously there are issues that come with writing in a language that isn't your first. I might also be making it harder on myself in the sense that I'm writing a YA fantasy, and I admire a certain level of lyrical prose, which is something completely different from the language, the casual language that I pick up by listening to someone talking on YouTube. You know, in that way, reading books is probably the only source for me to get into that kind of language, and that is a skill I'm still developing. So far, my voice is fantasy, yes, but it's still quite modern and basic, I guess. Maybe it would be easier if I were writing contemporary, but I'm not, so.
Now, lastly, publishing. Publishing, I feel like, is quite a different question from writing, and here I do worry. Yeah, I do worry. Like, what if I end up wanting to pursue traditional publishing, which so far I don't really have on my radar, but what if I do? Can I even query someone as a foreigner? Would I even have any sort of chances if, like, I don't know, there's some grammatical error in my query, or I have to say that I'm not a native speaker? I have no clue. I've also not done any research, so who knows? And then with self-publishing, I imagine that the costs are higher for me when it comes to copy editing and proofreading, because obviously I'm making more mistakes, and so there's more work for the editor to do, and maybe they will even like ask for a higher rate in the first place, or however that actually works with the rates. I don't know. Do I have any answers? No, I'm just happy-go-lucky writing my book, and we'll see how what happens then when we get there. Yeah, I hope this was interesting to you. I hope that I answered every single question that you might have had. I feel like I did, but if not, feel free to ask in the comments. Also, let me know in the comments if you're part of the club. Please say hi in the comments. I'm always so excited when I come across other people. I don't know why, but I do. Okay. Tschüss!